It's never been easier to support independent voices and experience the Portland Film Festival. Simply grab your Xfinity voice remote and say Portland Film Festival.
Next, the Watch With app appears with all the content at your fingertips. Enjoy behind-the-scenes access to free films created by a diverse array of talented independent filmmakers.
Willie, there are so many great movies to watch from the comfort of our own home, and experiencing the Portland Film Festival has never been easier.
Hello and welcome to the 2021 Portland Film Festival presented by Comcast. This year's festival is jam-packed with films, workshops, panels, and more. To find out more information about the films you're going to hear about today or to buy tickets, go online to pdxff.com. My name is Joe Stevens. I'm the Director of Programming, and I'd like to welcome all of our filmmakers to the panel today. Hey there.
Hello. You guys come in. How you doing?
We're doing pretty good over here. You guys mind introducing yourselves and giving us a quick little intro to your film?
I'm Brenna.
I'm Constantine.
I'm Ethan.
Basically, our film was a production that was centered on the story of a woman today, but a girl back in 1963, who was taken as a part of a group of girls between the ages of 12 and 16 that were illegally arrested for involving themselves in the civil rights movement. They became known as the stolen girls of the Lee County Stockade. And the name of our documentary is Stolen Girl. And it's basically her story, her experience going through that, being in a place that was pretty horrible. The stockade was extremely old. There was no furniture in it. There were no beds. There was no toilet. The toilet was one toilet, but it was broken. So between 15 girls, and they had their only water supply was a broken, leaky shower head for 45 days.
So what made you want to tell this story?
Well, we had one of our professors at Florida Polytechnic University came to us with this story. One of the stolen girls lives in our area in Lakeland, Florida, and they brought this story to us, and we decided to go with it.
So I saw a few of the survivors talking in this film. How difficult was it to get them to open up to you about one of the probably the most horrific experiences of their lives?
Yeah, it was very traumatizing. So what we did was we brought in experts in psychology, sociology, social work, and also a judge who also was arrested back in the 60s for his involvement with Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And we also had a historian who was very well versed in the event. Very compelling and very human aspects to the story, but they added an air of expertise. Our experts had PhDs and.
So were there any moments in filming this that everyone just felt like they needed a break, needed to step away from the project for a second, just to clear their heads, to just take a step back?
We can see you now.
I think we might have lost you though. Oh,
Can you hear us?
I can
Can you
hear
hear
you.
us?
Yep.
We're losing connection every so often.
Yeah, it happens. I guess if you want, we can try to bring on the next guest, and if you guys have a Smorgasdale connection, we can put you up in the end.
Can you not hear Joe? Can you hear us?
I can hear you. You're spotty, but I can't see you.
Really? Okay. Every so often we've been cutting in and out. Where did you lose us? We can see if we can try to make it through.
You're describing your panel of expertise or experts, pardon me.
Yeah. So we recruited experts in the area of civil rights history, but also the law, and also the psychological impact that would have occurred with these girls that was never really addressed. When they got back out of the stockade after 45 days of imprisonment, they really weren't welcomed back into the community. In fact, they were kind of blamed for doing what they did and standing up for what they stood up for, which is a very sad story.
So I think my next question had been, was there a moment during filming where everyone needed just to take a step back and just be away from the story for a moment?
Sorry, could you repeat that real quick?
Sorry about that. Was there a moment during filming where you needed to take a step back away from the story, or?
Well, with this story, this has been we've been filming the story for approximately 3 years. We got hit with COVID, so that was hard for our developing of the story and getting people to interview. So that was a part where we had a big step back in our story. And one thing that we wish we had was more of the stolen girls interviewed, but we weren't able to get any of the other stolen girls to be interviewed in our documentary.
And because this occurred in 1963, a lot of them, some of them passed away, and difficult to find. So we were working with an absolutely minimal budget. So, but I think the results are good. I mean, everyone that's seen the documentary has been really kind of wowed by it, but also there's a sense of sadness that comes with it, with the story. Of course, it's hard to talk about the civil rights movement, during the movement, without being kind of saddened by the human conditions that existed back then.
So you mentioned that people who've watched it have been wowed by it. How have you seen live audiences react to it?
I'm sorry, Joe. We're still. Can you repeat that one more time?
Sorry about that. How have you heard or seen live action or live audiences reacting to your film?
Very positively. We've done multiple focus groups and feedback groups. Really, the way that people respond is it's actually kind of amazing. Some people that are from other countries didn't even know that segregation existed at the time. Some people were shocked at the whole story. It's a shocking incident. This kind of thing could never happen today. 15 girls underage with no record of the arrest, which is astounding. They basically just grabbed the girls, took them to a sweatbox for a night, and then took them out to another town and put them in this stockade. They had an old man with a shotgun guarding the doors. And eventually what happened was the more redeeming aspect is that the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee that was operating in southern Georgia at the time hired a photographer named Danny Lyon, who was a pretty prolific photographer today, to go and find the girls, take pictures, and get the pictures back to them. And those pictures ended up in Jet Magazine, which eventually led to the girls' release. So it has a happier ending, but the problem was the girls expected, and they talk about it, or Melinda talks about it in the story, in the film. They talk about how when they got out, they thought it would have made a difference getting into Jet Magazine and into the national eye. They're actually posted in the Smithsonian, but the story really hasn't gotten a lot of traction. So when it was brought to us, we just decided it was going to happen. And this was a collaboration between two clubs. So these weren't professional filmmakers running around and doing videos all the time. Some of these students were brand new to the experience. And it was a collaboration between our media club here at Florida Polytechnic University and our diversity club. And it was quite diverse, which was kind of a cool experience.
So what's the main takeaway you want people to have coming away from your film?
How do we want people to feel walking away from our film? To be honest with you, like when we talk about like defined process message and what we want, to kind of implant into the minds of the audience, it's really just more about awareness of the past, awareness of what's happened in our society, because we oftentimes forget our history, and what kind of effect it can have on human beings. A lot of the girls were traumatized by this thing. I mean, you go for 45 days just with no change of clothes, and I would be traumatized. But they barely had anything. I mean, they had no beds to sleep in. They were sleeping on concrete. They had no toiletries. They used the containers that they got their food in, which they would get like 4 meat sandwiches every morning, I think. And they would use the containers to do their business. I mean, that's pretty harsh. You can't go to prison and be treated like that. And now we're talking about girls from 12 to 16. And one of the girls was actually pregnant at the time. So this is a shocking story. It really is quite shocking. So we want people to be aware that this should never happen again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
I want to thank you so much for starting by this morning. Stick around. We might have a panel question if we have a little bit of time. Thank you to the crew of Stolen Girl.
Thank you.
Let's bring on our next director, the team behind Beyond the Spreadsheet. Or the 90s Club.
Hi, I'm here, Robert Darwell. Nice to see you, Joe.
Good to see you.
I don't know whether before you start asking questions or not, whether I send over a few clips, and I don't know if you want to run just 1 or 2, 3 of those to give people a sense of the folks I talked with. That would be great.
Yeah, I'd say if we have any clips queued up, we could absolutely run them now. That'd be a great way to start. Susan, do you know if we have any clips? Here we go. All right. So I guess while we're getting that ready, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. My name is Robert Darwell. I'm the producer and director of the 90s Club. It's late in the evening for me. I'm speaking to you from Paris, France. So I'm about 9 hours ahead at the moment. Okay, here's a couple clips. Hopefully we get to see the people that appeared in my doc.
Ezrine. I am 95 years old. I was born in Rosenhain, New Jersey.
Say it again for me.
My name is Barbara Harris. Let's start again. I'm Barbara Harris. I am almost 93 years old, and I was born and raised in New York City. I'm Evelyn Coughlin. I was born in 1921 and 99 today, on my birthday.
So that's good. We saw a couple of the folks who I interviewed and got to meet over the past year.
And I saw you had an interview with a Portland local legend. How was it meeting and talking to Darcel?
Yeah, so in my documentary, I speak to 12 people who are between the ages of 90 and 99, and I wanted to speak to people, in different parts of the country and of different backgrounds. And Darcel definitely stood out to me as kind of the Guinness World Record holder as the oldest still performing drag queen. For my interview with Darcel was actually Walter Cole, who is professionally known as Darcel. And one of the most interesting things about the interview was, Walter did not dress in drag or perform in drag until the first time he put on a dress, he says, was when he was 37 years old. And, at that time, Darcel 15 was a character that Walter Cole would sometime perform in. But, here, good, 53 years later, Walter will tell you that Walter and Darcel, which were very different personas at the time, at the outset, have grown much closer together. And Walter is very comfortable being referred to as Walter Cole or Darcel, and that the two, kind of personas have become, much closer and much more singular over time. Yeah, it was terrific and a great experience to meet with her at her home in Portland last year.
Well, I can't keep muting myself. Was there any part of this process that was especially challenging? I mean, you filmed, I'm assuming, during COVID, and you had to meet a lot of older people. Was it challenging getting them to on camera with you?
Well, certainly. I had started about the filming about 1 month before, the lockdown and the pandemic began. So I had only filmed 2 of the interviews prior to that time. And of course, the most sensitive group of people appeared to be people who were, well-aged. And so the notion of getting together again with 90-year-olds during the pandemic was definitely something I was very sensitive to. I would say that one thing that you'll see that comes with becoming older is people have a bit less concern and worries about things. Of course, I was incredibly careful, with social distance and that. The first interview that I filmed during the pandemic was with Dick Van Dyke at his home in Malibu. So we filmed outdoors. We filmed at a very comfortable distance, at his home and that. But it was definitely that I was sensitive to far more, I would say, than the interviewees.
Yeah, that's something I definitely can. My grandmother is 98 and she is fearless too. I mean,
okay, congratulations, nice.
Yeah,
and hopefully you guys get to talk a lot. I mean, that was definitely one of the motivating factors for me in doing this film was, many of us have lost a parent or a grandparent, and one of the things that you wish after the fact is that you had kind of talked to them more or really kind of get to know them more. And, that was important to me. And I don't know, after filming every interview, I just left so kind of uplifted and hopeful about the future and about getting older, and that it doesn't necessarily have to mean that kind of life, is kind of winding down. But in fact, there's the freedom to have whatever goals you want to set for yourself.
Absolutely. What's one thing you want audience to take away aside from, that getting old isn't the worst thing in the world?
I mean, I think, I really set out to make a Wisdom of the Ages piece and kind of to show the value, that can be obtained from, from older folks. There's been, thankfully, so much attention paid to so many other groups of people over the past several years. But I think one of the groups that has not gotten a lot of attention is, the elderly, and there's a big problem with ageism, and it still seems somewhat acceptable to make jokes about the old people, or to kind of like readily dismiss them as not being all the way there, or even to treat them somewhat childlike, oh, she's so cute, oh, look at him, that type of thing. And in a not a hammer on the head kind of way, but in a more getting to know folks kind of way, I definitely wanted to do something that kind of combated that take on battle ageism, which it's getting older is one unifying factor amongst all of us, right? If we're lucky enough to get there, we will all be old, whether you're white, black, trans, Latino. I will never be a number of those other things, but we will all be old one day. And it's definitely a unifying factor. And so just kind of wanted to highlight the hopefulness of that.
Well, absolutely. And thank you so much. You can catch the 90s Club at pdxff.com.
Thank you.
Let's talk to the team behind the Invisible Season.
Hi. So I'm Jake Price, and I'm the director of the Invisible Season. The Invisible Season is set in Fukushima, Japan. And I spent a decade there working within the exclusion zone and around the exclusion zone, basically documenting and talking in depth with these residents as they tried to hold on to their lives, because they really loved their homes. And that's something that we didn't really see in the media after this disaster, is that this was not a place that was easily left. And so I wanted to put a more subtle face on this disaster and who was affected.
Well, thank you so much. That was a great introduction there. Why did you, what was the process like making this film?
So it was a bit of a challenge. I left New York City 48 hours after the triple disaster began in Japan. And the biggest hurdle there was the fact that there was a nuclear power plant melting down. I thought that this was an absolutely important thing to be told, and I have a lot of Japanese heritage in my life, so I thought that I would be able to tell this story with a little bit more subtlety and nuance. In the very early days, for example, the newspapers were just using one word only to describe the Japanese, and that was stoic. And on the outside, that's certainly true, but there was a lot more going on inside that we weren't seeing. So I wanted to go and kind of tell that more nuanced story based on the influences that I had. I didn't really even know where the meltdown was happening. I didn't have time to research it because things were moving so quickly. So I basically landed, stayed at a friend's place in Tokyo, found out where this place called Fukushima was, got on the plane, went inside, and for the first 2 years, I was on the border of Fukushima. And I became very close with a lot of the people there and got to know the specifics of the local culture, which then helped me out a lot moving forward and getting to know the people to the south in Fukushima. And then from that point on, yes, it was a lot of time just in very isolated places. Wow.
How hard was it to get there? I mean, I can't imagine it would have been it relatively easy to get in while a reactor had been melting down, and while well, I'm assuming there's a panic in travel at the moment. How difficult was it for you to get there?
Okay, are we talking about from New York to Japan, or actually inside?
When you landed in Tokyo to Fukushima?
Right. So, it was a challenge. I flew through, I think it was Toronto. A lot of the flights were canceled. So, I've spent my life going into very hard situations. So I don't remember, it was 10 years ago, but I managed to find a flight. It was totally packed. I think there was a lot of Japanese returning home. And I think that they were mainly going to the south, if I remember correctly. And then for about a year and a half, so it's a nuanced question or a nuanced answer, and that is there was the triple disaster, which consisted of the earthquake, the tsunami, and the meltdown, right? To the north of Fukushima, it was the tsunami and it was the earthquake. So I spent a year really just with a lot of evacuees in one small fishing town, got to know them very well, was studying Fukushima. And then with the people that I'd met, they helped me get inside to Fukushima. And then once I was in, I had the proper documentation and things like that. And then I could go into the exclusion zone pretty much whenever I wanted to.
So were there any moments during filming that you questioned, how this would come about, how you would finish this story?
Yeah, so in the beginning, it actually began as an artist portrait. There was this amazing artist that was exposing radiation, right? You can't see it. But doing his research, he realized that radiation gives off gamma rays. Well, gamma rays expose film, so he put this irradiated soil on top of film and made these amazing things. And then we talked, and I realized I really, my goal always was to also listen to the people of Fukushima, and it was going to be a tale of his interaction with them, and we both agreed that it should really just be only the people of Fukushima. He's Japanese, but didn't live there. So the film evolved over a decade, and the reason why I chose to make it a decade is because it's such a slow-moving disaster. I was writing on Facebook today, that the disaster happened March 11th, 2011 at, I think it was 2:46 p.m. Well, in terms of radiation, in terms of uranium, we're not even at 2:37 p.m. yet. So a lot of people, a lot of friends were saying, no, you have to get this out. Jake, what are you doing? It's 5 years, it's 6 years. Come on, people are going to forget about it. And I said, no, this is too important. We need this to be a long-term story. It needs to come back. Because this is going to be melting down for all of our lives. So that gave me the freedom to also really get the nuances. I don't speak Japanese, but we have a fantastic rapport with one another. So again, getting the subtleties of this particular place, right? Fukushima is very distinct from Tokyo, and Tokyo is distinct from other places. So I really gave myself the time and the freedom to understand the nuances. And so that's why I took the time that I did, and that was a big challenge, both financially and just psychologically.
If you had the chance to go back 10 years ago, how would you, or would you even do anything different about how you came to put the story together?
I really wouldn't. I was so glad that I just was able to take the time, and I think that one of the choices that I made was, it was a very hard choice not to go, I did the initial grant applications. I had some good success early on with POV and Lincoln Center to show some of the web-based stuff that was supported by them. But then I was afraid of getting funding and having pressure to get this film out too quickly. So I wouldn't do anything differently. I think that maybe if I did anything differently, I would have slowed down a little bit even more. just because it did give me the ability to, again, really understand the nuances both in the natural world and in the human world.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. You can catch Invisible Season at pdxff.com. Thank you, Jake.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, I believe we have the team from Coming Home next.
Afternoon, Joe.
Good afternoon.
I'm afraid it's not a team. It's a one-man team today.
One-man team today. Do you mind introducing yourself and a little bit about your film?
Sure. So my name is Andrew Malcolm. I'm the director and editor of Coming Home, the Mpilo and Makossa story. Coming Home documents a team of world-class conservationists in South Africa translocating 2 orphaned rhinos from the orphanage that they've been raised in to their new home at the Sumkanda Community Game Reserve in South Africa, with particular attention to one of the orphans who was actually orphaned at Sumkanda some years ago when there was a poaching crisis that happened on the reserve, and he actually was found next to the body of his mother. So it is in fact a coming home for Mpilo, who was born on the reserve, that is now able to protect him through this Herculean effort by these conservationists.
That's quite a story. What attracted you to this story here? Why did you make this film?
Well, I've been lucky enough over the past couple of years to fall in with this group of conservationists. There are organizations like the Wildlife Emergency Fund, Conservation Solutions, the Aspinall Foundation, whose priority focus is on intervening with emergency animal rescues for African wildlife, specifically in Mozambique, South Africa, sometimes in Angola and Kenya. And I was invited by someone who has unfortunately passed away quite recently to go and participate in filming of a rescue of elephants. And when I was there on the ground, really got connected to these people and so inspired by their drive and the work that they do that I became committed to documenting their work as part of a spec series called Saving Giants. So Coming Home is one of a few films that I have made with these individuals like Derek Milburn, Kester Vickery, Dr. Dave Cooper, people who are in the film, who are legends in their own right and just haven't had this type of work documented in this way before. So I thought it was an important opportunity to show the rest of the world what these people do and more importantly, how they really do it. So not greenwashing this work, showing them what it actually takes to make this stuff happen in the 21st century.
Perfect. Did you have any real struggles outside of the standard kind? Any struggles putting this film together?
Yeah, well, it happened during COVID, and I wasn't able to travel. So unfortunately, this was a remotely directed film, which was the first time that I'd done it. It was quite a challenge. I've been very lucky to work with some incredibly talented cameramen and filmmakers in their own right on the ground. James Boone, Neville Eskerwiesen, Thomas Pistorius, these people that are when you see wildlife programs, they're the guys who are on the ground getting covered in dirt and, cutting themselves on bushes and running away from animals. And they've been doing this for a long time. So I was able to coordinate and work with them and fortunately have allies on the ground that were able to facilitate this filming. And then, of course, the second real challenge was looking at, dozens of hours of footage for something I wasn't present for. And being able to piece together that story in a way that was true to the work that gets done on the ground and in a way that makes the conservationists feel seen and heard in a way that's authentic to their experience and their story, while also telling the truth of these 2 incredible rhinos' path to success.
I want to talk a little bit. I guess it had to be done, but I've never seen remote directing done like this. Would you mind talking a little about the process?
Yeah. So I had also never seen it done that way. So this was definitely a learning experience. It started with having some very in-depth conversations with the conservationists that I work through that are putting this together to really get a sense of the story, who's involved, what was going on, and then spending, a couple of weeks going over that information and trying to distill what the essence of the story that was being told was, so that I could provide some pointed direction for my producers on the ground who are going to be conducting the actual interviews. And then it's a huge amount of typing. So, you know, I had a 75-page list of interview questions and different types of positioning and shots that I knew needed to be taken, depending on what stage of the operation that these were in, and then coordinating schedules. And then it was a lot of conversations specifically with the people that I'm working with on the ground about what I expect, what we were looking to get in camera, and you know, it's difficult when you're doing documentary. You don't want to guide a narrative because you want to see what's going on, but you also need to get the people that are working with you enough of a scope and understanding of what is happening on the ground that they can be poised and ready to ask the questions that need to be asked at the time in which this is happening. It's an incredibly fast-paced scenario to be working in. So we didn't have the luxury of a couple of weeks of filming. We had 2 days with one day where there are no do-overs or, you know, getting people, you know, there's no checking your lighting or getting yourself, you know, back into position. You know, you have what you have in a run and gun scenario. So it's all really preparation, making sure everybody was on board with what needed to happen and prepared to get it in camera.
Well, it all sounds very intense.
It's intense.
Having
done it 4 times, it's nuts.
Do you have any advice for someone who wants to try something similar?
Work with people you trust, that you know and are going to deliver, and especially when you are in a place in which you have limited control over the outcome. It's so important to trust and rely on the skill set of the people that you have brought onto your team. I know I often work alone as a director and an editor for the projects that I do. It can be very difficult for me to place that subconscious trust in the hands of another artist that I'm working with to get what it is that I'm envisioning to have done. But it's absolutely crucial. And then I think when you're working with people in these high stake environments, it's really important to authentically show them that you are on their side and that you are intending on telling the truth to the best of your ability in a way that reflects what they're intending to do. I mean, you know, I never shy away from telling these people that if an animal dies on a translocation or somebody does something that's really reprehensible, that I will tell that story. I mean, that's part of reflecting the truth. But fortunately, I work with people who don't do anything like that. And when tragedy occurs, and they understand that part of telling this authentic story, the work of people at the Wildlife Emergency Fund, Aspinall Foundation, Conservation Solutions, African Vets for Wildlife, all these people understand there's risk involved in what they do, and it's a breath of fresh air for them to be able to speak authentically about this. So know your people and trust them. Show that you're trustworthy and trust them in the process.
So do you have any projects coming up that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, like I said, Coming Home is one episode of a perspective series that we've been working on for the past 3 years called Saving Giants, which is about this emergency translocation and intervention work. There's another film that's part of the Saving Giants family called Malalaine that is also out there right now that will be both Coming Home and Malalaine will be at a physical location in New York later this month for the Wildlife Conservation Film Festival, which we're very excited about. If anybody's in New York and wants to come and check it out, WCFF.org. I'm not trying to cross promote here. I apologize. But yeah, I'm working on 2 other episodes that focus on community to community conservation efforts in South Africa, which is really important because these people had their land stripped from them in apartheid, and then after having a reclamation process have decided that they want to commit part of that land to wildlife conservation and how they're doing that. And then also a film about preserving the important tusker genetics of the large tusked elephants that remain in South Africa, which there's really a handful across the continent, let alone in this country. But there is a reserve that is willing now to give over some of their elephants to increase the genetic potential of other herds that exist in the country and preserve those iconic animals that we think about when we think about elephants. Unfortunately, so few elephants have large tusks now because they've either been shot out or potentially even genetically changed themselves as a way of protecting themselves. And this is one way that they can make that happen. So Saving Giants is an initiative we're pushing forward, working very hard on. It's a very unique opportunity because there are organizations that are working together in a way that really no other conglomeration of organizations have been willing to work together to this degree on camera before. And so, yeah, we've got two films coming out, one out now, and of course Coming Home, which I hope everybody enjoys when they see it.
Well, thank you so much, Andrew, for stopping by and talking with us. Yeah, you can watch this film at pdxff.com.
Great. Thank you, Joe.
Let's talk to our next director.
Hi.
Hello.
I just want to apologize first because there might be construction happening. I think my neighbor is getting his house sanded, which I wasn't sure was a thing, but it seems to be today. With the lack of insulation in Long Beach, California, apologies ahead of time. It might happen.
I mean, I live down the street from a fire station, so you might hear someone coming by.
Okay, fair game.
Yeah. You want to introduce yourself and talk about a little bit about your film?
Sure. My name is Lauren Coleman, and my film is the feature-length documentary, How to Throw Your Own Goodbye Party. It's a story about Josh Fischel and how he managed to pull off the largest festival that Long Beach, California had ever seen. But at the same time, he was battling some health issues that some knew about, but not quite as bad as, didn't realize how bad it was. So what it ended up being was interviews talking about that time and trying to figure out how much he even knew about his health, because it appeared that he figured out a way to get everybody he loved into one place before passing away, because it was only within a week of the festival that he did pass.
What attracted you to this story? I'll talk in a second about what attracted us, but what attracted you to the story?
Well, he hired me to coordinate the festival, to be one of the coordinators in 2015. So I was watching it happen. And in 2016, we basically put tickets on sale for this festival where we had like the Specials and Squeeze and Dr. Dog and Iron and Wine, all these huge bands. But we didn't know exactly where we were going to have it. And we hadn't talked to the city. And so we put it on sale, and it was like a few months before the festival was supposed to happen. And every day it was like, is it going to happen? You know, it was just such a roller coaster ride. And so I tend to document things anyway in my life. I think it might be because I have a terrible memory, so I just want to remember it when I'm older. But this especially was like, something's happening here. I can't see down the line what's going to happen, which usually I'm okay at, but this I had no idea. And so basically a few years after the fact, we had continued to do the festival for 2 years in his honor. And then when we decided that we weren't going to do it anymore, or at least for a moment, we took a hiatus, we were sharing stories, and I just thought, this can't be forgotten. Like, this guy did something so huge. And, you know, we all pass, we all go on to the next big adventure, but he did it in such a grand way. And it was so him. That's the kind of guy he was. He did everything big. So it just seemed like a phenomenal story that needed to be told. And if we weren't going to continue the festival, I thought, at least let's solidify the story.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, it was a great film. I'll say what attracted us at the start was just your Josh reminded us of our Josh, our executive director, who tries to take on a mountain of a project at a time. And, you know, he every festival he tries to one up the next one. He wants to make it the best he absolutely can every year. And he tries to
come out of the gate swinging, like not even a thing like, let's get better. Like, let's just be the best, like now. You know?
Yeah, we sat down and watched your films. Like, I can see some similarities in their personalities. They want to take on the world and just make the greatest thing they could possibly make. And it's just, yeah.
And then everyone around them is like having to facilitate it. And you're like, stop having ideas. Like, this is great already. Like, yeah, I'm sure it's tough too with you guys doing this online. Like, you're like, okay, and then we're going to interview everyone. Okay.
How have you seen, have you had any live performances live audience for this movie yet?
Just came back from the Chagrin Documentary Festival, the film
Nice.
festival, and that was the first time it ever screened, and it went well. It's just, you share it and people are like, oh, a festival, and then it also delves into addiction and loss and these harder elements. So, at the end it was kind of a little solemn, but it did start a lot of really good conversation. So, yeah, it was a really unique and cool experience to watch it with people who didn't know him and aren't from Long Beach. So it was really, really cool.
So that's the element I missed this year, is being able to watch with directors how audiences react to their films. Because yeah, I mean, being able to in a documentary connect an audience with someone they've never known is very it can be pretty challenging, and usually it's just nice to watch that happen. Um, what's one part of the process, one part of your filming that you want to talk about, something memorable?
Um, I guess the interviews themselves, it felt like therapy. Everybody from that first year, it happened so suddenly. He was doing his thing. I mean, he always showed up too. That was the thing. Like, we didn't realize how sick he was because he was there every day. Like, if I was sick, I'd be like, no way. But he was there at the festival doing the golf carts, riding around, and it was Sunday night that he didn't feel well and he went to the hospital, and he passed within that week. And immediately then we went to plan his memorial because he loved doing production, so we did a whole production for his memorial, and then we did the next festival and the next one. So it was really wonderful to like give everyone a space to talk and to ask questions and to try and piece this together of how do you know someone one day just like who's killing the game, and then he's just gone. It's a traumatic thing. So it was really nice I did like 40 plus interviews, so I was just talking to people, like crying 4 times a day for weeks. So I think that, and then also the moment it was done, because it's hard making films. Like, you think about it, you get the idea, you get excited, and then it's the inertia of it. But then once you start editing, it becomes so overwhelming. You're like, how do I cut this together where other people get what I'm feeling? And so I would say the filming, and then the moment where it was locked. I was like, yes, yeah.
Yeah. Would you mind talking a little about the catharsis of making a film that touches so many people around you like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, so I pretty much just knew him as a boss, and him having so many big ideas, it was very frustrating, to be facilitating that. Oh, that I learned about the do not disturb feature on my phone because he would call all the time. And so for years, that's how I saw him. And, but I would hear about how, wonderful he was from all these people and how generous and how amazing. And so by interviewing everybody, like his mother and his brothers and his wife and his friends, I got to see him in all these other dimensions, as well as like this full picture human being who was extremely lovable and driven, and yes, difficult. But I think for me, it was just so nice to now be able to walk away. I was already grateful to him because he pushed me beyond my limits, and that's probably why I even attempted to do this film at all. But now there's like this deep respect for him as well. So yeah, it was definitely I'm very glad that I was able to do it.
Well, thank you so much. I guess, do you have anything you'd like to talk about? Any other projects coming up?
Well, they can follow the film on Instagram at Goodbye Party. I might be segueing back into music. That's what I did before the festival, and it's a little easier than film, but we'll see. So, but my name is Lauren Coleman. So projects might be coming up near the end of the year, at the beginning of next year. But it'd be great if people followed the film Goodbye Party on Instagram.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us this morning.
Thank you.
Believe we have, oh, here we go.
Hey there, I'm Nisha. I'm the filmmaker of A Hurricane with Fire. I can do a brief intro, so that's what you've been asking people. So my film is about the Alameda fire that happened down in Southern Oregon in 2020, and a look at the immediate aftermath as well as the long-term effects, especially because, unfortunately, the fire's path was through a lot of the low-income and Latinx communities' homes. And so really, how does that shape the way that our community, you know, I'm a longtime Southern Oregon resident, the way that our community is composed and who can live here and who cannot, because affordable housing was already an issue before the fires.
Well, thank you for that interview. I'm glad people are picking up on my my patterns already. Do you have any challenges making this film? Would you like to talk about?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I, you know, being a Southern Oregon resident, pretty much the day after the fire, I went out and started filming. I didn't know necessarily what the film would be, if I would put together a documentary, but I knew that I had to start documenting the process and what was going on. And really being in the environment right after the fire was challenging, both emotionally and physically, because it wasn't a forest fire. It wasn't trees that were burning. It was homes. And so very toxic materials were being released into our air. We were all breathing it, but especially going too close to the spaces that were burned to document that. And then obviously emotionally, a lot of the spaces that were burned were community members that I knew. A lot of the homes that were lost were from people that not only were, you know, strangers, but close friends. And so being with the emotions of the huge impact in our community, as well as feeling this duty and calling to start documenting it. And then closely after the fire too, to start documenting the stories of what was going on, both with the support that was pouring forth from the community, feeling very hopeful about that, as well as the extreme loss that was happening.
So how was it talking to the residents just after they've all lost, you know, so much? Was anybody hesitant to hop on camera and share their stories?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great question, because I feel like as the filmmaker too, being extra sensitive to what had just happened, you know, obviously respecting people's emotional state and what they'd been through over trying to get a story or trying to get a certain interview. So really, to start with, I began by interviewing the people that were in the positions of support, who hadn't lost their homes, but were pouring forth. El Tapatio is a local restaurant here in Southern Oregon, and they set up a big donation site a few days after the fire. And that's really became a hub for where people were going to access resources, to find where they could stay, especially the Latinx community, people who didn't speak English. And so knowing where they could centralized focus the efforts for the immediate support. So starting off there was a great place to begin. And then putting both a call out to people who wanted to come forth and share their story, as well as asking some folks that I knew who had lost their homes if they would be open to being interviewed. And even in the interview process, being sensitive to what questions I asked, and if it felt like I was pushing an edge for somebody, pulling back a little bit. You know, sometimes as a documentary filmmaker, you want to push those edges and get into the responses and the emotions. But with this subject matter and how close it was to the immediate impact of the fire, really playing on the side of not re-traumatizing directly after such a big trauma of losing one's home was the angle I took on it.
Did you? Sorry about that. I lost my place. Do you have anything especially memorable? Anybody who you spoke to who had a especially compelling story?
Yeah, I mean, there were so many compelling stories, and the ones that I was able to include in the film too, two spring to mind. So one was Bo, who is in the film in the middle section, and he did not lose his home, but the night of the fire, he went around and was on his bike live Facebook broadcasting what was going on, what homes were burning, what homes were safe. And even, in that process, because not a lot of news up to the moment by moment was happening. So people were just evacuated out of the space where their homes were and wondering what was going on. He really became this on the ground makeshift reporter that was going around and giving people information through Facebook Live. And in the film too, he talks about how with one home that he drove by in particular, he biked past, he saw that it was still okay amidst many other burning homes all around it. And he let the Facebook Live know, he said, hey, this house is still okay. And then the homeowner was able to see that live broadcast and go and actually fight back the fire and save their home. And so I think that's a great example of how, because of the community members really just like pouring out their care, risking even being in a dangerous situation to support one another, some homes were spared while others were lost, unfortunately.
And you talked a little about the community being able to come together and rally. How important, I guess that's an easy question to answer. How important is that for something like this where you have everyone just coming together and helping out their neighbors? How do I want to ask that? Does it make sense?
Well, I think it is a good, what you were saying made me think about kind of another example. Obviously, it's so important. And I think a beautiful thing that was a piece that inspired me while I was making this film was seeing how supportive and caring our community did become in light of this horrible loss. I had some interviewees that I spoke with talk about how even during the evacuation, which was extremely stressful because the alert system didn't quite work, and so people didn't really know what was going on and were getting evacuated moments before the fire was coming towards them. Even in those stressful situations at intersections, people were saying, no, you go ahead. Okay, now you go ahead. So when people weren't crashing into each other, being very respectful, helping one another, telling their neighbors, hey, I just heard this, we need to move here, we need to get out here. And then in the aftermath too, really pouring forth of the love, the caring, the support, people who were already, this is in the time of COVID when it was really in the beginning stages when the fire happened. But even in those situations, people welcoming whole families into their homes where maybe they already had 5 people living in that home, welcoming a family of 5 or 3 or whatever to give support in that situation. So I think that that's such a valuable piece. And one more element is that, when I was interviewing, I spoke with people from Red Cross who were there supporting aid, giving aid, and they talked about how really they were so impressed by our community because in many natural disasters they went to, they didn't see that much support pouring forth. So I think that speaks a lot to the heart of this space.
Well, thank you so much, Nisha, for sharing your story with us this morning. You can find her film at pdxff.com.
Thank you for having me.
Hi, Joe. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Great. Hi. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm really excited to be here.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I can start with an intro. My name's Cassidy. I am the director and producer of Tipless. It's a feature documentary about the tip-free restaurant movement in the U.S., sort of why restaurants are moving towards models that include gratuities within pricing, and sort of how minimum wage is affecting all of that, and sort of an effort to kind of help create a more sustainable industry, as well as pay people more equitably. So it's been a long time making this film. It's been about 3 years, and I'm so excited that it's premiering here at the Portland Film Festival, which is very exciting for me. I have a special place in my heart for Portland, so I'm really glad it gets to show for the first time here.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
What attracted you to this story? I mean,
Mm.
well, I guess I know why you're attracted to the story. What do you got to make this film?
So the film was really birthed out of my own experience working within the restaurant industry. So I've worked in and out of restaurants for 10 years or so. Like most college kids or artists, I used it to fund what I do. And through that experience, I got to know the good, bad, and the ugly of what is working for restaurants. And I love what restaurants can do and the way that it can bring people together, and what it can do for communities. And I kind of stumbled on the story by actually working at a restaurant in the Bay Area that ended up going to a tip-free model, and they're featured most prominently in the film, and they let me tell their story of why they decided to go and make this huge change. And they made the change back in 2016, so before it started to kind of make a lot of traction. It's starting to make more traction now, but it really gave me a close and personal look at the ethos behind the tip-free restaurant movement, what people were trying to kind of fix within this sort of disparity that's built between the front of house and back of house employees, and sort of really taking on the responsibility to try to do that despite whatever was going on in legislation or how it was affecting their business. And I thought that was very admirable.
Yeah, so that was a very interesting story. It was definitely one that got me thinking. I had a few ideas coming up. Have you seen I guess, yeah, this is our first screening with us for the first time. You haven't seen it resonate with people yet, but
I don't know if you can hear me. I lost you for a second.
Oh, there we go.
Sorry, I heard you say it was a very interesting story, and then you cut off.
You're just mentioning how, your story was one that got me thinking quite a bit.
Oh, well, good.
Go about making these changes.
Well, that was my whole hope, is just to get people thinking a little bit more. If you watch the film, you realize I don't have hard solutions, or I don't try to push a hard change on anything, but I really want to open up having conversations, because I think through my experience, I realized how complicated all of this stuff is, and how sometimes what can look on the face, especially politically, what can look on the face is something really helpful and beautiful, sometimes has ripple effects and complications that we don't know. And so it really gave me a passion to kind of try to get to a place where we could have better conversations about that, especially for these businesses, because they definitely, I talked to a lot of businesses while making the film, and most of them would be very willing to talk to me off camera, but there were definitely some that were a little afraid to kind of talk about what was going on with their business and how, because they didn't want to be painted the wrong way in a conversation. And so I really did it for them, and trying to open the door to have a better conversation, and give a little bit more understanding of where some of these businesses are coming from when they're talking about how it's affecting their life and the way they can support their employees.
So aside from having some people not wanting to talk, too openly to not be received well, did you have any problems putting this film together?
Oh, well, it took a lot of nuance and a lot of thinking about, okay, what's the best way to put this together and what's the fairest way to share all of these different opinions about tipping, but also minimum wage and the way that we can pay our employees well. And we tried to, me and my editor spent a lot of time weaving this story together very carefully, trying to make sure we weren't being too heavy-handed in either way, because we really wanted to open up the conversation and not be divisive in so many ways that politics can sometimes become. So it definitely was tricky that way. I think the hardest part of it was really trying to get people in Flagstaff to talk to me, especially on camera. And that was, that really affected the way that the story ultimately ended up going, because I was talking to all of these business owners, and I run a comedy festival, or I'm on a production team of a comedy festival that runs in Flagstaff. So I knew that town really well, and I knew those businesses, and it was so heartbreaking to see them talk about what's happening in their business, like in their town, and the divisiveness, and how some of these unintended consequences of these laws were making it really hard for small businesses to thrive. And that's a community just built on small businesses. And so it was really emotional to hear all these people being like, I support you and I want to say something, but I can't just for my business. So I'm very grateful for the people who did talk to me and were willing to step out and support something. And so that was sort of the hardest part, just really getting people to be willing to commit and put their face on something that's kind of controversial, but sort of underneath it all. I didn't realize how controversial it was until I really started trying to make it.
Do you have any advice for anyone making a similar, very topical political, economic film and trying to remain neutral in the way they show it?
Yeah, well, I think the beautiful, interesting thing, and also the kind of chaotic thing about documentary filmmaking is how much power you have of representing people and representing issues. And I think for a lot of people, we can see that it's easier to create something very flashy and black and white as opposed to nuance and get more clicks and get more attention. And I would just say, like, really try your best to stick to what you believe and holding out what you think is true as you go through it. Like, we're supposed to be representing truth, and we're all creating something, and there's going to be that responsibility as a filmmaker to really just hold to the thing that you can stand up at the end of the day and say, this is what I found as I just explored this topic, and I feel this is the best representation as I see it. And if you do that and just stick to that moral instinct in you of representing truth, I think you'll get something beautiful.
Oh, perfect. Do you have any projects coming up you'd like to talk about?
Oh, not anything particularly right now. I have a couple things like in the background that I'm trying to figure it out. I actually spent 3 years. I kind of stopped filming right before the shutdown happened. So I spent the last couple of years taking a break, slowing down, and trying to figure out, what do I want to do? What's next? So I have a couple things that I'm playing around with, but nothing ready to be like announced yet. But I know whatever comes down the line for me, it really is going to continue in this legacy of trying to create better conversations, being able to handle more controversial or tricky topics with nuance and openness. And so I just want to keep continuing that because I found so much beauty and growth in it for myself. And it's just what I want to keep doing.
Well, thank you so much. And I hope your next projects go just perfect for you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Hey there.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right.
Would you mind giving me a quick introduction and a little insight to your film?
Okay. I'm Greg Mitchell. I'm live in Nyack, New York, where I'm speaking to you, just outside of New York City. And my film is Atomic Cover-Up. I'm basically, I have been until recently more of an author. I've written a dozen books, and I've been an editor at national magazines and so forth. But I have, I think actually going back a few years, segued more into film. This is the first film I've directed and written and co-produced on my own. So it's a debut, I guess, even though I've worked on a lot of other films. So the film is, I like to joke, but it's not really a joke. It's been 38 years in the making. I first came to this story in 1982 when I was the editor of a magazine called Nuclear Times, which was the Bible of the anti-nuclear movement then. And I've kind of stuck with it in various articles and in books and other ways. And finally, a couple of years ago, I was able to start making this film, which I kind of always dreamed about making. So it's been a long process, but very gratifying now with all the attention it's getting. But so you may ask, what is the story? Okay. Well, I found out, I can't go into the full details, but immediately after the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the Japanese newsreel team went into the two cities and shot absolutely astounding historic footage. And after a short while, the Americans arrived and seized that footage, and it remained buried for decades. The Americans then had their own elite film crew, including a cinematographer who had shot Akira Kurosawa's first film. You can imagine the quality there. So they started shooting color footage, the only color footage shot in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And they shot tens of thousands of feet and just exposed the shocking what happened to the survivors and the aftermath of the bombings. And then that came back to the US the next year, and that footage was seized and buried, classified for decades. So the story is really about, first of all, what these people saw, what the filmmakers and cinematographers saw, what they witnessed personally, and then the saga of the footage, how and why it was taken away, why it was buried, what it showed that's unique, other footage we've all seen. And then much later, how it finally emerged, and what, I guess a little bit of what's been done with it since, including my film. So it's really, that's why you have the cover up, you have the initial shooting of the footage, and then you have the burial, and then you have the exposure in more recent times.
So you say you've been holding on to this idea to make this film for 38 years. What's it like finally, getting it done, putting it on, getting it? Yeah, I mean, after nearly 4 decades of working and planning, getting it finally put together.
Well, it is like I said, it's gratifying. It's kind of amazing to do it. I mean, I've seen the footage eventually did emerge. That the National Archives, I've seen a lot of it. I worked on a film about 20 years ago that won the top prize at Silver Docs called Original Child Bomb. I've written, like I said, I've written about it in 3 books. I don't have any clips, but here's one book, Hiroshima in America, with Robert J. Lifton. There's some of it is in that. This is a book that's basically forms the basis of the film, Atomic Cover-Up, which I wrote. And then my most recent book called The Beginning or the End just came out last year, and it's about MGM squashing and rewriting the first movie about the atomic bombings back in 1947. So, as you can see, it's been an obsession of mine. So, it was something I always wanted to do. The footage was available; no one was making much use of it, and and just again going back a couple of years ago, we were able to make the first 4K copies. So people have seen some of this footage in other forms, but my film is the first where there's not only is there footage that's never been shown before, but there's also most of it is in 4K. So even if you've seen some of it before, it's a little different experience. And just one other thing is it's really the only movie that's ever, some of you may have felt, well, I've seen a bunch of movies about the bomb or the bombings or whatever, but this is the first film that's completely from the viewpoint of filmmakers. It's a film about filmmakers. It's a tribute to documentarians everywhere. Um, and so, unlike any other film, it's completely focused on the filmmakers themselves, and then one particular American soldier who had helped shoot the film, who then spent much of the rest of his life trying to find it, trying to get it out, trying to expose it to the world, and eventually succeeded. So it's not, I wouldn't call it a happy happy ending, but there is one protagonist who stuck with the footage, and the footage finally emerged.
God, did you have any real bottlenecks, any walls that prevented you from moving forward as fast as you have liked?
Well, it just was, I guess, a matter of figuring I could do it somehow. That there wasn't a total mystery in how to get a film like this together on a very low budget. But thank God the National Archives is public domain. So except for getting, copying the footage, and of course all the money on editing and so on and so forth, we didn't have to shoot new footage, and we didn't have to pay for the, for the actual that amount of footage. But there was a real monkey wrench, was that we didn't quite get all the footage we wanted because the COVID came last March, and we still had a few more reels to order, and they've totally shut down. I mean, there was no way to get at it. So that was a little disappointing, but fortunately we had most of what we wanted, and the film was well along in terms of the scripting and the editing and so forth.
Do you have any advice for someone who likewise has a project they've been thinking about, executing for quite a few years?
Well, if you had, it's like even with books, they always say, write what you know or write what you have a passion for. And that's, I don't know if it was true decades and decades ago, but certainly editors, and I imagine film people, you have to kind of prove that you know the subject, that you're passionate about the subject, and that you can execute it and so forth. So, that's half the game right there. If you have the expertise and the contents and the access and everything like that. I mean, like I said, I've studied this for 4 decades now, almost, this general subject of the atomic bombings. So I am something of an expert by now. And so I can, I can feel comfortable that I'm telling the story correctly, or that I know where to get material. So that's a big, I think that's a big thing, that people have to, be honest and kind of know what you can, what you know and what you don't know.
Do you have any plans to expand this film a little? Maybe make it a feature length or do a follow-up?
Well, I'd be open to it as someone. I mean, it's 52 minutes, which is a very awkward length. It's generally considered a feature, certainly for festivals. It's been in many festivals, and it's generally considered a feature. Some festivals it qualifies as a short. So it is an awkward length. So I suppose ideally, someone would come forward and say, I'd like to buy it or fund it for another 20 minutes, 30 minutes. But short of that, I think it speaks for itself. I think it's a very good length. There is a question of how much you can ask people to see some of this footage. To me, the footage has been edited in a subtle way. It's not that there are graphic moments, but a lot of it, I think, is more sort of subtle and artful. I don't think it's definitely not. People may cringe at times, but that's certainly not the overwhelming feeling to it. There's great original music underneath it. So I think it's, it is what it is. And I think people would, appreciate that it doesn't hit you over the head and it doesn't go on forever. It's not Showa, it does come to an end, and, then you're left thinking with it, because it didn't test you unduly. So, maybe something more will come of it.
I want to thank you for stopping and talking with us this morning. You can watch Atomic Cover-Up at pdxff.com.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe.
We're going to take a little break before our next round of directors. We'll see you soon.
%83 of the population of Oakland voted to pay the lowest paid worker more money. How do we make this happen? And Liz and I's approach was to bring our management staff together and say, where is the win-win in this situation for all parties? And who is the parties affected by this law? Well, let's just say we kept it status quo. You have a server who's making minimum wage plus tips, which means that all servers get a raise. To afford their raise, we have to raise prices. Higher prices means that when they get a tip based on gratuity, that they're not only getting a raise hourly, but they're getting a raise in tips as well. Cooks already make above minimum wage. But now, because we have to pay all the servers this higher rate, cooks aren't going to get their raises this year. And not only that, but the cost of goods of everything else is going up around them. So they're losing big time. Managers are the people who make the restaurant operate. Well, now their employees just got a pay raise that's putting their rates above their salaries. And what's the incentive to step up and do more when you can come in and do less and make more money? So the managers lose out. The guests have to foot the bill because we have to raise the prices. If we see a dip in cover counts because of higher prices, then we have diminishing returns and more expensive bills. So that's status quo.
It's never been easier to support independent voices and experience the Portland Film Festival. Simply grab your Xfinity voice remote and say, Portland Film Festival.
Next, the Watch With app appears with all the content at your fingertips. Enjoy behind-the-scenes access to free films created by a diverse array of talented independent filmmakers.
Willie, there are so many great movies to watch from the comfort of our own home, and experiencing the Portland Film Festival has never been easier.
東日本大震災前は毎年山開きにたくさんの人が集まり、ハイキングを楽しんでいた山です。山道を歩きながら小さい頃に祖母や父といった小高の山々を思い出しました。本県浜通りは米のほか山菜類、果物類が豊富で、海産物も南方双方の漁獲があり、自然に恵まれた豊かな環境であったと、失って初めて思い知りました。福島第一原発、毎年、盆正月に必ず来てくれていた息子や孫に、 豊かな福島の姿を取り戻し、何の気兼ねもなく山登りやハイキングを楽しみ、山菜採りやキノコ狩り、川魚釣りができるようになるのは何年先でしょうか。今の日本では金さえあれば食料品などは容易に手に入りますが、金銭に換えられない失った自然の豊かさ、大きさを痛感しました。
Welcome back to our Meet the Directors. Our second set. We have the team behind Neurodivergent with us.
Hello.
Hi
Hi,
there.
Joe. How are you?
Doing well, yourself?
Good, good. How are you feeling? You've been doing a lot of these.
Oh, just
Starting
wondering.
to.
Would you mind introducing yourself and your film?
Sure. I'm Aptingquast Saylor, and I am the director of Neurodivergent. It's a documentary that I also happen to be the subject of. So I was in my final year of film school, and I was really struggling with my dyslexia, and I needed accommodations. So I went in and I got the whole neuropsychological exam. And they were like, obviously, you know, you have dyslexia, and you obviously know you have ADHD. And I went, what? I'm sorry. I don't know what you're talking about. And it turned out that I had ADHD, and I just never knew. And as I looked into it, I realized more and more that so many of the things that I had struggled with were those things coming from ADHD. So because we were in quarantine and I couldn't figure out why no one else was talking about this, I knew I couldn't be the only woman and only adult who had just gotten diagnosed with ADHD. So I figured I have to do a thesis. I should do a thesis on this. So I started filming myself, and yeah, it's been kind of amazing to find out how many other people had the exact same experience that I have. So it's been cool.
So I was lucky enough to be diagnosed with ADHD when I was in middle school. So I don't have quite the same experience as you,
but you know the struggles, you feel it. And it does, it's interesting. It manifests differently when you are an adult, as I'm sure you know. It's a, you know, when you're a kid, you're a kid. So of course you run around and you act crazy. And that's what I always thought that it was, that you just can't pay attention. And there's just so much more to it than that. And I think even adults who are diagnosed as kids, you look at someone who has it as an adult and you're like, oh, that's why I do that? I thought that I was just lazy or stupid or crazy or, you know, any of those things. So that's, yeah, I'm sure you've had a lot of the same experiences as me.
What was it like for you? Well, first, he was finding out, being diagnosed, but also putting this film together. How is that different from any other project you've done in film school?
It was pretty wild. It was, how should I say this? It was probably the best thing I've ever done. I learned the most that I've ever learned on any other project that I've done. And it was also the most challenging, mostly because luckily I had a pretty amazing team. We all were on Zoom constantly as I was filming myself in my most vulnerable moments. I would say they know me like they're my family. So it was an intense experience in that way. And my husband also, he's a photographer and an actor, and he was helping me, and we were learning to do all the sound, and our soundy was talking us through it. And you know, we're on Zoom like 10 hours a day with my editors, and you know, it was a pretty wild situation, especially since I had started in a narrative comedy background. And kind of fell in love with documentary, and I realized, why can't documentaries be fun? There's still a story. Why can't they be sort of multimedia? And not I love me some Ken Burns, but not everything has to be that. It can be a narrative experience within reality, so it was interesting.
How was it being both the director and the subject in your film?
I would not recommend it. It was not great. Only in the sense that I had to compartmentalize quite a bit. And I think everything takes more time, because I think you need more help. And luckily I felt very supported by everyone, but you're in front of the camera. Luckily I could do some interviews and do all of that, but ultimately it was my journey that I was trying to reach other people with and connect with others. And so you have to have the camera on yourself. And there were days when I didn't feel like doing that. There was a reason that I wanted to be behind the camera. But I'm happy I did it ultimately.
Is there anything you take away from the process that you'd like to share with anybody?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, there's so much. I think on a filmmaker level, your crew is as we all know, it takes a village to make a movie and make a short movie. And I think surround yourself with people who get you and listen to you and support you. That's what I learned, because I had that for this, and it was really wonderful. And as far as ADHD, I feel like I'm still learning about that every day. But I think the most important thing is to remember that actually the shame is a lot harder than the ADHD itself. When you're undiagnosed, you don't know what's going on with your brain. You don't have the tools to be able to succeed in the way that you could, because it's a gift. One of my mentors in the film says that it's something that is special and makes you who you are, and it makes you creative. So why would you want to get rid of that? You just got to have the tools to be able to harness it, so dealing with the shame and dealing with the challenges that come along with that and letting that go, that's actually the harder part. So get some therapy. That's my advice.
and learn your tools. Yeah, I've had
learn your
20 years to figure out how to deal with mine. So.
And I'm sure it's still a work in progress.
Every day, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for sharing your story with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for having me as part of the festival and Neurodivergent.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have In the Event of My Death.
Hello.
Hey there, Brian.
How's it going? Nice to meet you, Joe.
Good to meet you.
Yeah.
Would you mind introducing yourself and giving us a little bit about your film?
Yeah, of course. My name is Brian Scott Steele, and I'm the writer and director of a short narrative film called In the Event of My Death. And it's a comedy, even though dark title, dark subject matter. Yeah, it's a story about death, obviously, and friendship, loss, and sort of finding hope through the grieving process. You kind of find out very early in the film, it takes place the day of one of the main characters' funeral, and you find out that he has left this little journey or quest for his best friend and his sister Mandy as well. But he sort of leaves this little video diary, and it takes them on a little quest through sort of like their past, their shared past, and it's very nostalgic, and it's meant to sort of help them grieve and get through the day, but even just get through, life moving forward with dealing with the loss. So.
How did you decide this is the story you wanted to tell?
You know, it was a few things. It was, for some reason, stories just sort of like simmer in my brain for a long time. And this was like a story that had been simmering. And then you just sort of think of little moments and think of scenes. And it's sort of just so characters sort of start to come to mind. So there was no like one point where I was like, yes, I have to tell this story about, you know, death. But it was more, it started as a writing exercise, I guess. I wanted to write something that was sort of similar to the movies that I like watching. So I just started there, and I sort of like, I had the nugget of the idea, and I just sort of like just kept going with the script. And then I once I had the idea and I had a first outline of the script, I like to show it to friends, and they like I had a lot of really good responses from friends and mentors about the script. And so I was like, well, I guess I have to shoot this because everybody seems to like it. So
now for you, especially in a short, is it hard sticking like to the script, like to the letter, or do you have a little room for improv in there?
yeah, you know, there was a little bit of improv, but I made sure that I got the script in the best place that it could be. Yeah, I just like many versions of the script, and just sort of like having friends read it, and even friends pitching lines. So we sort of like did all the improv stuff before when I was really like fine-tuning the script. But there are a couple little things in there that were thrown in by the actors on the day, just because I told them like, hey, if you're feeling like just putting a little button on something at the end, or finding some little moment. So we did have a few of those. I'm trying to think if there's any that I can think of off the top of my head, but it's like 95% was scripted. So yeah.
Do you have any advice for anyone wanting to make their own short?
Goodness, I would say just go for it. I actually spent a lot of time, I work in post mostly, and I had spent a lot of time, I always wanted to do my own short or my own feature. So I've been writing scripts for a while. Like I would write a short, and then I would sort of get busy with life, and it would sort of just like, I would miss the moment. But for this one, I really liked the script, and I had friends. The three leads are a few friends of mine as well. So I showed it to them. Everyone was very excited. And then the momentum of that sort of got me going. So I would say you just got to try, you know, you just have to try. That's all I ended up doing was like, okay, well, baby steps. Like I got the script in a good place, and now I'm going to talk to cast, and now I'm going to, you know, have some producer friends help me out. It was very much a labor of love. Like, find your tribe, and like, you know, find those people who sort of believe in you and can help you along the way. Because like this wouldn't have happened if I hadn't had the friendships from, you know, producer friends, and Tristan, who scored the thing. He was a friend from a TV show that we both worked on, and an associate producer was like my professor in college, who's a buddy of mine now. But yeah, just putting yourself out there, just try. Like you have to get over the fear of failure. That was a big hurdle for me, but you know, it was a leap of faith a little bit. So.
How do you want people to walk away? Use one word to describe how you want people to walk away.
In one word?
One word.
You know, the word would probably be hope, because that's the biggest takeaway that I wanted people to come away with. You know, it's been a long time since I've been to a funeral and have felt those feelings, but you know, a lot of what's in the short, it contains, you know, like my feelings toward funerals in general and death and that sort of thing. But I didn't want to leave people with a sense of like, well, that was a little bit of a fun ride, but like, this is a bummer of an ending. So I wanted it to be full of hope, and I I wanted it to be like a big warm hug at the end. So if you want, watch till the end, because it'll hopefully, give you a little boost, and hopefully, yeah, I'm rambling a little bit, but that's that was the intention there. Just a little bit of hope at the end.
Do you have any plans to expand on this to make it a feature?
I would love to make it a feature. I'm sort of putting feelers out there to see if there's any interest in that. You'd have to find a bit of funding, and but I'm working on a script right now that's unrelated, but that is something that I'm open to. And if anyone wants to do like a series of this thing, like I have some ideas to make it like an 8-part series too, because there really is like it's a little bit of a journey. So you could expand on the world and expand on the characters. So yeah, it's in the back of my mind to possibly make it a feature or some sort of series or something like that.
Oh, I want to thank you so much, and good luck. Hopefully you are able to expand this, because it is a pretty funny story.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks so much.
Thank you again for talking to us this morning.
Of course, yeah, I'm happy to be here, and it's so nice to be part of this festival. Love to you all.
Oh,
Hey Joe, how's it going?
doing well. Yourself?
Just chilling, just vibing. Just been like waiting in front of a computer for no reason. Just
Exactly.
just happened to be here.
Can you introduce yourself and your short?
So my name is Valor Aguilar. I'm based in SoCal. My film is called 72, and it's a short experimental animation that's pretty much a diary of like a very rough couple of years of my life. And it sort of documents my struggle with mental illness, my road to recovery, and the friends who saved my life.
Now, I've usually seen it's a little harder to not only make a short, but to make an animated short. Talk about some struggles putting that together.
I think you have to be a little insane to want to make animation, and because you're stewing in your own head, and then you have to like do the groundwork for the animation where you're just sitting there drawing like the tiniest movement. I think my only advice is to break it down into small pieces, and when you're in doubt, just do it. Like Nike says, just do it.
What was your favorite part of putting this together?
So I don't know if it was a favorite part, but it was more of like a purpose. I mean, this film was sort of a thank you to everybody who was there for me when I needed them. Yeah, I mean, pretty much.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting. Do you have any advice for anybody who wants to, I guess, touch on harsher topics in their own shorts?
I struggled a lot with like the public vulnerability of it. I mean, there's so much content out there these days, and I'm like, what does it matter? Why should I do this? And ultimately, I was just like, it came down to this was something that I needed to do for me, and didn't matter why, just that I needed to do it, and so I did it.
Well, we're glad you were able to do it. God, you have anything coming up next for you as a director?
Just personal pieces. I'm really interested in like music and anime, sort of expressing like the emotion that comes with songs. Besides that, nothing official. Just ideas in the brain.
The running theme is having ideas and getting them out eventually, maybe. I mean,
Yeah.
I want to thank you again for stopping by here. I guess, do you have any plans to maybe expand it?
I don't have plans to expand it. I wouldn't say no to expanding it, but I'm more of a like, I'm looking forward now. Like that there are better things to do now, and I'm ready to do them.
All right, well, Valor, thank you so much for stopping by this morning and talking to us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for your little interview. All right. Have a good one, Joe.
You too.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for having me on here, Joe.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm Eli Matilda Ridley. Our film is Manifesting Madeline. It's a short film that's part of your coming of age short film block, which was so good. It was so powerful. I loved the films you kind of put together in that. And I loved the theme of sexual abuse and survival that kind of ran through it. I felt like they all really streamed beautifully together. It was very like powerful experience watching the whole shorts program. And it is a queer short film that explores a gender fluid character's experience of a PTSD traumatic flashback, and how through this PTSD traumatic flashback and really like facing her trauma, how she ends up moving more towards a moment of being able to accept her true gender fluid self and trying to move towards transcendence, ego transcendence, and self-acceptance.
So what was the inspiration for you to make this film?
It came originally from as a proof of concept for a feature film. I was writing this feature film, and the first scene that I ended up writing was this scene in the yoga studio. And so far, the feature film has changed, and so this more is like a proof of concept of a chapter in the life of the protagonist. But originally, this was kind of the beginning of the film was happening in a yoga studio, and so the short film itself kind of came from this idea of wanting it to be like a proof of concept, and then like creating it so I could show people, and then make it into a feature film. And it kind of ended up developing a life of its own, and really has kind of ended up really fully kind of creating, like finding its own story, finding its own life, finding its own soul. The inspiration behind it came from a true story, not specifically like some of the things that happen in the film aren't exactly what happened to me, but it was more certain moments that happened to me, and I was trying to like use the film to kind of work out my own gender fluidity and trying to accept myself within being gender fluid. And also really it came from like there's this one yoga studio that I went to, and there was this gender neutral bathroom, and whenever I looked at that gender neutral bathroom, I always wanted to go in, and I was always like really terrified to do it. And I was like, man, why am I so scared? Why am I feeling so frightened about this? So I just tried to turn to the screenplay, turn to writing, turn to film to kind of explore this fear.
Okay, well, thank you. Did you have any struggles capturing this story?
Yeah, there were. It was like a pretty like chaotic roller coaster of experience, but amazing at the same time. Like I wouldn't trade it for anything. It was absolutely incredible, but it was a pretty wild roller coaster, and it's still been a pretty wild roller coaster. In that, like it just all happened very fast. Like I kind of had this idea, and I was about to move to Atlanta, and so I was kind of reaching out to filmmakers and crew and people over this Facebook group, and I was kind of thinking I was going to do like a short trailer, and we're going to make like a crowdfunding and raise all the money, and then make the short film. Then it's going to be a while, And I ended up like making it just a week after I moved to Atlanta because we just decided it'd be better just to go for it. So I like just basically took out my savings, like paid everybody, like just went for it. And it was chaotic. Like our main character, Charlie, I feel like this whole process has been an experience of like learning that expectations will not meet reality. And anytime you have an expectation, like don't be like, you know, Tom in 500 Days of Summer and hold on to it for dear life. You gotta like let go of it because it's gonna come crashing down. So for example, like when I connected with this person and I thought they were going to end up being Charlie. And so a lot was kind of built upon this idea of like, okay, this is Charlie, this is kind of my envisioned Charlie being. And then due to kind of unforeseen circumstances and some kind of things that went down, that person had to drop out. We weren't able to have that person as Charlie. And so last minute, we were like trying to cast our main character who really was going to be like holding this film. It's very emotional, very emotionally intense. So it does require the actor to go to some dark places, but also, you know, very skilled, like acting, very skilled, like connecting to your emotions and radiating and all that. And so we were trying to find this person within a week. We were like getting our crew together within a week. Everything was like very fast, very chaotic. But ultimately, like we found the right people. We found everyone in psychodrama. They talk about tele and how tele is like how your soul kind of is pulled towards certain characters, and certain characters, just your spirit and the spirit of the character just really resonate together. And I feel like there's a lot of tele in our casting. The actors who played the younger versions of Charlie and of Ty were just incredible, and both of them did such an amazing job. All of the actors in our film just really like connected so well to the characters and just brought the characters to life, brought a new spirit to them, a new energy to them. And it was really, really beautiful. And I was like so grateful and like just exciting as a director just to get to experience that. Cause for so long you see it in your head, right? And then when it comes into life, it's just like, wow, this is amazing. Holy cow.
I will say you're pretty bold for just moving to Atlanta and a week later, you know, starting to film. That's a pretty quick turnaround there. Would you mind talking a little bit about just that, having to be on your toes as a director, being able to, you know, almost doing things run and gun is the way the popular phrase here. But you're doing it well in the middle of a move. You want talking about that?
It was like definitely a very intense experience. It was exciting in that I felt like I had a community right when I came to Atlanta, and I really wanted to move to Atlanta to make movies. So it's kind of cool that the universe, Great Goddess, like whoever's kind of guiding this whole thing, arranged for that to happen, because it did create a beautiful community in the beginning. And I do think it's aligned with the reason why I should be here in the city and what my soul mission is and what I should be doing with my life. And so it's really exciting to kind of like get to fall right into that. But I luckily was staying at a friend's house. And so I didn't have to I wasn't searching around for apartments at the time. So I was very lucky that I was able to stay with a friend during that experience. But I imagine if I was also looking at apartments after the shoot, because these are like 12-hour days, so I'm getting off really late, starting early. And so like I probably, might have been like homeless for like a little bit, my first little bit of being in Atlanta. But luckily I did have a friend who I stayed with. But I mean, honestly, a lot of this, I'm so grateful to my producer, Elle, because she really was able to help me through a lot of this. And she also had connections with different people too that she brought on board. And everything all ended up kind of falling into place. And I think that's the thing, is like, even though I've had different expectations and there've been stresses and faced with like completely different outcomes, it is pretty amazing to see how ultimately things will kind of like click and fall into place. And, you'll gravitate towards the right people and the right situations, and everything kind of does work out. But in that moment though, it's definitely like I was very flooded by like stress and anxiety and just like, and also feelings, I guess, of shame too, of like not thinking I can do it, or just like feeling guilty about certain things. And also this is a very personal film too, so some of that personal trauma, not much of it, but some of it did come up in moments, and I just tried to find ways to have a good cathartic cry or talk to a friend or do something to kind of release it out.
Do you have any projects coming up you'd like to share with us?
Well, I am hoping to make this into a feature film, actually. So if there are any people who watch it who would want to collaborate on it, or who would want to just learn more about the project, I'm on like the second draft right now of the feature film, and so it's not like 100% ready to go yet, but I'm definitely hoping for it to be ready to go within this next couple of months and stuff. And I'm just looking for more people to kind of collaborate with and connect with it and make it into a film. The feature film is going to be more focused on the main character Charlie and his relationship with another character named Flo, and it's kind of more of a relationship drama about trauma, PTSD, two sexual abuse survivors, and how trauma kind of impacts their relationship.
Well, I hope you submit it to us when you're all ready, because that sounds like a great watch.
Thanks.
Ellie, thank you for stopping by and talking to us today.
Thank you so much. And yeah, thank you so much for having us part of the festival. Portland, I think it's Cassidy was mentioning, Portland's a special place. And I remember Portland had some of my like all-time favorite cinemas. So finding out that we got into here, I was just like, oh my God, this is amazing. Because yeah, something about the Portland cinemas are just like the best cinemas in the country. They're so cool.
Absolutely. We're honored to have you. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you.
Oh. Hey there.
Hi, Joe.
How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, thanks.
Would you mind introducing yourself and your film?
My name is Melanie Uy, and my film is World of Henna, and it is the first feature-length documentary about the cultivation, the art form, the culture and history of henna in India.
Oh, perfect. Now, I know you're a henna artist, but how did you become attracted to this story? Why did you decide to make a film?
So actually, as a child, my dream was to become a filmmaker. But then as I grew up, I took a couple of different paths and ended up finding myself working as a full-time henna artist. And that's been my profession for the last 16 years. And a couple of years ago, I was thinking about what I wanted to do next in my career that would be a little bit groundbreaking and something different to offer the henna community. And I had the idea to combine my childhood dream of filmmaking with the subject of henna artistry. So the obvious place to begin was India, because when you say henna to anybody, their first reaction is Indian weddings. So globally, it's really famous for the way it's used in Indian culture, even though it's used in many different countries and cultures throughout the world. So that was just the logical place to start, with the idea that over the next decade, I will visit some other countries and feature them as well in their own documentaries.
So that answers one of my final questions. You have plans to continue?
Jump to it. I've been watching.
How is it having this connection to your subject matter? So, I mean, you're a henna artist. You're able to get an immediate end to this. What's it like reporting essentially on this medium you've already immersed yourself in?
That's a really good question. A huge point that I wanted to convey in the making of this film, and what I wanted the audience to feel, was the romantic and spiritual connection that I feel to the plant and the art form when I'm doing it. So after more than a decade and a half now of working with it, I feel so deeply connected to not just the art form itself, but the connection that I have with the people that I work with, my clientele, and the experiences that I get to be a part of with them. So really wanted to, even though it's a documentary and you're wanting to present all these facts, I also wanted to convey that sense of romance and really try to enchant the viewer. So that was a huge point. And another one, though, was that I didn't want to put myself in front of the camera and try to make the film about me as a henna artist, showing you what it was like in India. I wanted to step back and let the people and the country tell their own story, hence all the interviews with the local people. And I had originally dreamed that I would have an Indian female voice as the narrator for the film. But with COVID and the restrictions due to that, it was just so impossible for us when we didn't have any budget to pay anyone to do it. So I ended up doing the narration myself, which in the end I think was quite good, because instead of having a different local voice as the narrator for every subsequent film, my voice would be the one thing that is the theme and ties everything together throughout the different films. So, and then, I could just record that in my basement with my recorder pretty easily. So, it was logistics, but so those were a couple of key things about the making of the film that I really wanted to hold strong to.
What was your favorite experience making this film?
Oh my gosh. here's the thing about filming like on location, doing a documentary like this, when you compare it to films that where they really set up interviews and they do a lot of research and have a huge budget, this was the opposite. So we were just run and gun pretty much the whole time. So it was had an element of excitement as well as stress to it the whole time. But what I loved is, because I've been to India 2 times before, I've traveled there for 2 months each visit, was that having the purpose of the documentary and having cameras in our hands gave us the absolute reason and excuse to chase down everybody on the street, to take opportunities anywhere we found them, which ended up having us invited into people's homes. And one of my favorite memories was, a goal of mine was to try to find some hijra, who are the Indian transgender population. It's a complicated topic, and I think there might already be films about them, but if not, I want to make a feature length about them and their culture and what they live through. They dance and they provide blessing, but they are also a very marginalized community who have to resort to sex work a lot of the time. So they're a fascinating community. And I had hoped to find some to include in the documentary and show how they use henna in their lives. And we happened to find some on the street and took photos with them, but then they kind of just wanted to go on their way, and we chased them down and asked them to join us for chai. And so they kind of were befuddled and wondering why we wanted to hang out with them. And they agreed to join us for chai, and we managed through the chai vendor who could speak good English. He helped translate for us and let them know what we were doing. And then they pulled henna cones out of their purses and had us henna them there on the street. And Erica danced with them because one of them was really into dancing and showing off for the camera. And so this didn't really end up as any kind of main feature in the film whatsoever. You just see 1 or 2 clips of them, but that was like a really peak moment for us to actually manifest the thing that we've been dreaming of, and to plant that seed for a future documentary if we could spend a lot of time with them in their community in Mumbai. So that was one of the best memories, along with every moment was an incredible experience in memory.
That kind of leads me to my next one. We usually like to ask about happy accidents, something you may not have intended to film, something you maybe didn't plan for, but that just made your film that much stronger because it happened. Did you have any moments like that?
I think another key moment, which we definitely hadn't planned, was, all along the way we were meeting interesting characters. And one particular character was a man in Pushkar called Ashok, and he is a camel activist. And so he is absolutely obsessed with camels, and he's also a person after my own heart because he is a textile collector. And we befriended him, and then he ended up saying, well, there's a desert festival happening next week in Jaisalmer, so you should come and join me in the camel procession. And so we jumped on that opportunity. I wanted to go back to Jaisalmer anyway. And so that was an extra incentive to go. And we ended up meeting up with him, being dressed up in full outfits, Indian outfits, and joining the camel procession for several hours. That's the start of the Desert Festival, and got some great footage and photos from that. And that's something that we never would have had the opportunity to actually actively participate in. And so it was just such a joyful and lively and colorful day for us that we had never expected. But that was like every moment in India was that, being whisked away to weddings to perform on stage playing Indian drums that we had never played before, or being taken here and there, and just being able to say yes to every opportunity.
I'm glad. You're answering all my questions for me. I was going to say how important flexibility, but I mean, you guys were open to all these new experiences and got amazing footage because of it.
Yeah, it really, it made me feel like I only want to travel with the purpose of making a film anywhere I go now, because of the way it opens doors and connects people to you. And I felt like not only did we have these amazing brief experiences, but we also made some deep friendships and connections with local people that I haven't quite had the opportunity to make in the past when I've traveled there. I've always felt like being a foreigner was sort of at the front of the experience, whereas in this case we were on the back foot, and all the local people were prominent for us, and that was really incredible because it also helped me to break through some of my, you could even say prejudices about like safety in India, safety for women in India, and interacting with Indian men. And we made some deep friendships with some amazing people, and were really held by these incredible families. And that really broke down a lot of sort of prejudices that I had built up from watching so many very heart-wrenching documentaries about India. If you go on YouTube and you go down that rabbit hole, it creates a lot of fear and a lot of judgment. And I wanted to create a documentary that shows that there is so much joy, there is so much compassion, there is so much humanity in a country with 1.4 billion people. And that's a huge lesson for us in these times, is that we have to see each other for who we are as humans and make those personal connections, because that is what breaks down judgment and prejudice. And that's really what it did. And I hope that in viewing this documentary that the viewers can really, truly connect on a personal level with all of the people who we interviewed.
Absolutely. You've done a great job being ahead of my questions. Is there anything I forgot to ask
something new for me? What else have you got?
Is there anything I might have forgotten to ask, or anything you wanted to share?
I just like to share that actually, you know, because as I said, my background is as a henna artist. This is actually my first foray into filmmaking. So I'm really honored to be selected for the Portland Film Festival. And this is hopefully the beginning of a new sort of side career or main career for me. So I feel really honored that what we managed to create has been considered to be high quality enough and relevant enough to be selected for a film festival. And that this is hopefully the beginning of many. And from here, we are applying for grants so that to try to get funding to go to Morocco next year to film the Moroccan edition. And one thing that Erica and I are obsessed with is really high quality B-roll, because you might notice in some shows or documentaries that the B-roll can be a little bit like, if you're paying attention to it, it's very throwaway. It's like, oh, they just went onto the street and just got a couple of very unimpressive filler shots. And so it almost felt like for more than 50% of the time, we were just trying to capture amazing B-roll. So every moment of the film is so intentional, and don't blink for a second, don't look away and check your phone for a second, because every shot we intentionally placed for absolute maximum visual pleasure to really convey the muchness of India and the color and the crowds and the bustle of what you experience when you go to India. So it's beautifully nostalgic for those who've already been, and really conveys the essence of India for those who haven't been. And so, you know, we just want people to pay attention to that. And I think that from here on, we will continue to be obsessed with high quality B-roll. That's our thing.
Oh, I was going to say, that was one of the first things that drew my attention, was how visually interesting just everything was. I look forward to your Moroccan expansion. I hope that money comes through pretty quickly.
Me too. We hope to go in the springtime. So we're applying for grants over the winter, and we'll see what we can rustle up.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for talking with us this morning.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
We look forward to your future work.
Thank you.
Oh, and then there's one. Hi there. Would you mind introducing yourself and your film?
Hey, Joe. Yeah, I'm Jeff Stowell. I wrote and directed Ezra, which is a short film in the Keeping Portland Weird shorts block.
Yours was definitely a weird one, and thank you for keeping Portland weird with it.
I get weird.
a little bit about your film.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's certainly a bit strange. I mean, it's tough to categorize. I guess I would call it like a tone poem. It doesn't have any dialogue, so it just kind of moves from mood to mood. And there's a lot of music, a lot of, you know, fun sound design. And, you know, I mean, the story, I'll say it's about a volcano in the Pacific Northwest, a forest ranger who has some strange visions. And, you know, I don't want to say more. I want to kind of leave it up to personal interpretation. It's one of those kind of movies.
I loved the shots you got in your film. The first watch through, I was watching between my fingers because I wasn't sure where it was going. It's like, is this going to be horror? Am I gonna, you know?
Yeah, it's kind of a horror film, right? Like, I don't know.
I always watch films, 2 or 3 in the mornings. Like, do I want to go to bed tonight? Do I want to watch this film? Like, how am I gonna feel?
Spooky, the demon baby.
Exactly. Do you mind telling us what attracted you, why you decided to write this film? Or make this film, pardon me.
Yeah, it was a lot of different circumstances just colliding, as I'm sure that is the case for a lot of filmmakers. So it was like, a certain group of people getting together to make a project. From the writing point of view, one of the first ideas that sparked it was I had seen some news report. I don't know why I was watching it. It was some YouTube video about a volcano in Italy, and there were these volcanic gases rising up out of the grass, and they were like, that was like this indication that this nearby volcano was going to go. And so like that was just for some reason really evocative to me, and it just kind of was this first spark of many other ideas. But that was what kicked it off. And then yeah, like I said, it was also just a great group, like Robert Schmelzer, who was the cinematographer. A lot of it was just like my relationship with him and like what we love about cinema, and just like going for shots that we love, and doing our own spin on them.
Let's see. Would you want to expand on this to make your film a feature, or maybe just maybe a sequel?
No, sir.
No, completed story.
What's funny though, I will say briefly though, oddly enough, the third actor, V. Thurgood, who was like the demon baby, he was 3 years old at the time of production, and now his little brother is 3. So I literally just today I made the joke. I was on the phone. I said sequel, but no.
Was there anything during filming that you wanted to discuss? Anything that was memorable? Any challenges you might have had?
One particular challenge came to mind as I was hearing some of the stories. There was one location that I'm sure people, if they're live in Portland, are familiar with, the government camp and the sort of the ski bowl out there. And that was a main location for the film. And we location scouted it many times, including like a few weeks before filming. But it was right around the turn of the season, right? It was like spring. And so when we drove out there was no more snow. So in the script, it was supposed to be snow. And so what we have in the movie is rock. And it's still very cool. It's very dreamy. But that was like something like, what are you going to do? You can't, okay. You just roll with it.
Yeah, all you can do is drive a little further up the mountain.
True.
I guess going back, would you do anything differently? Maybe shoot a month earlier or something?
Exactly. No, that's great. I would say that. I would say don't count on funding until you absolutely have it. That goes without saying. And, I would just say, just, post-production can be a limbo, and like my projects tend to spend a lot of time in post-production. And I think that can be common, like to feel like once you've shot your film, you feel like it went really well, and now you're just, boom, you're an artist alone on this island. And there's actually, it's like this whole other world of artistry and professionals that need to come in. So, I would just say, look out for that, plan for that, budget for that. Don't forget about post.
God, anything I'm forgetting to ask you?
Well, no, just, I don't know. I'm honored to be here. I hope people check it out. I hope people like maybe come up with interpretations that I might never have dreamed of, because it is designed to be that way. I mean, from the earliest meetings, Robert and I talked about it being like really open and sort of purposefully fertile for interpretation.
Well, absolutely. Your film, again, yeah, I had to watch cautiously the first time. I absolutely recommend people.
Twin Peaks fans should love it.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
Thank you.
You can catch all these films at pdxff.com. I'd like to say congratulations once again to all of our filmmakers, and thank you for Comcast for helping us put this festival on for 4 years now. You can go ahead and vote for any films you like. Remember, every film has a chance at an audience award, so go ahead and vote. Thank you so much.
It's never been easier to support independent voices and experience the Portland Film Festival. Simply grab your Xfinity voice remote and say Portland Film Festival.
Next, the Watch With app appears with all the content at your fingertips. Enjoy behind-the-scenes access to free films created by a diverse array of talented independent filmmakers.
Willie, there are so many great movies to watch from the comfort of our own home, and experiencing the Portland Film Festival has never been easier.